Ladies and gentlemen, on the way to the interview. Wait, something's amiss.
Oh, flawless recovery, John. Absolutely seamless there.
Thanks, Eddie. Here it comes now. Bold as brass. All the way from the Peak District. Co-founder of Northern Value Creators. It's Simon Cookson!
Okay, hello everybody. We're here today in Roundhay Park. I'm here with Simon Cookson.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about a few things that Simon often talks about at some of the events that he's spoken at. So I met him at Agile Yorkshire. He talks a lot about leadership and that kind of thing, don't you?
Yep.
So we're just going to have a walk today around Roundhay Park. So one question I wanted to ask you actually, Simon, was what question do you often not get asked about, and is something that you would actually like to talk about more?
I think it's about how difficult people think it is, particularly for experts, to get the whole people management piece. I think that is something we don't talk about enough. You know, these people that have built their career and got promoted on being an expert in something, so it's their technical expertise. But when they do get promoted, when they do succeed in an organisation, something changes. They start to get judged on how well they lead people, but that's not what their expertise is. And I think we don't think about that enough, we don't talk about it enough, and we don't realise what a big shift that is. And I think if we could get that more on the agenda and give people more help in that space, work could be a hell of a lot better.
It's because obviously you talk a lot about the technical skills that you might have learnt over your career, and you get expertise in that. And I suppose sometimes the imposter syndrome might kick in when it comes to getting thrown into the leadership situation.
Absolutely, it does. It's imposter syndrome, if we want to kind of think of it like that. There's a lot of survival strategies that we've learnt from kind of the study of neuroscience, where when we're thrust into a situation that we find threatening, we will retreat and use our kind of reactive, instinctive survival strategies. And if you think about somebody that's maybe spent years of their career building technical expertise, be that software engineering or accountancy or whatever it might be, and then as I say, you then get judged not on that expertise but on how you lead people. And that's a massive shift, and therefore that massive shift is really triggering to people, and it triggers all sorts of difficult behaviours, bad boss syndrome, toxic people at work, all of these things. I think if we can change the conversation and think more about supporting people and understanding particularly what our brains are doing when we do feel threatened, when things are new, we do feel as if we need to protect ourselves. These are really base instincts that kick in. And the more we can understand that, the more we can understand behaviour. And, what annoys me massively is when people get blamed, when people get labelled, or when people get written off. So often you hear, this about technical people. They're not leadership material, they're not good people. They've gone as far as they can go, they're happy to stay in kind of technical roles. And of course some people are, not saying everybody needs to follow the same pathway, but some of the absolute best people I've ever worked with are those people that have got a strong technical background, but then have been able to add to that really strong people and leadership skills. And they've always been the best people that I've ever worked with. And I think there's so much untapped potential in the kind of the tech community, the expert community, that if I can, in a really small way, if I can help people like that see that the whole people piece is learnable, is gettable, then, as I say, work can be so much better. If I think back to my career, I spent a lot of time in a kind of account management and client liaison and things like that, being that sort of bridge between technical teams and client teams and, the customer. And one of the things I really struggled with was saying no and giving bad news and sharing things that had gone wrong, or, talking about the potential of missed deadlines. So I've come to realise that that was my kind of people pleasing. And being a people pleaser made me avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And so I tended to make things 10 times worse than they ever needed to be, because I avoided talking about things, I didn't share bad news, I tried to bury it, and all of those sorts of things, because I didn't want to have to deal with the fear, and it was just a fear rather than a reality, of having to have awkward conversations, being able to diffuse difficult situations and all of that. So I just avoided them and suppressed them. Where if I knew what I know now, and if I had the skills that I've learned around how to bring up difficult topics, how to make myself feel less kind of under threat in those difficult situations, I would have got on so much better. And it's not the stuff that we kind of share and the training we do and the coaching that we offer is not really hard. It's not super difficult. It's about, if you could just learn a few small things, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
And it's not about transforming who you are. It's not about changing your kind of fundamental personality. It's not about being an empath or a social worker or anything like that. It's just a few tweaks in how you understand how people work. It is small changes in language and small changes in how we prepare for conversations. And if we make these small amends, these little tweaks, it does make big changes. It really does.
I suppose, like, some good examples of the little changes that you think you've made, like, throughout your career and stuff? And
yeah, I think the kind of fundamentals start with, and I became a parent, 12 years ago now. We adopted our first child, say about 12 years ago, and I had to go on a massively steep learning curve. And one of the fundamental things that I learned, particularly in trying to handle some of the more challenging behaviour that you often get when you adopt kids, is the separation of the person from the behaviour. And so you never blame the person, you never label the person, you talk about the behaviour.
yeah.
And I think we forget that in work. We think we're all grown up, we're all professional, we all know this stuff, but I think sometimes we forget to separate the person from the behaviour. And I think that's the starting point to understanding that the way our brains work produces certain behaviours when we get stressed. And this idea of separating the behaviour from the person gives us a little bit of space, because when you move into kind of leadership roles, I think the most transformative change that you can make is when you shift from reacting, so something happens and you let your instinctive reactions take over. So if you can move from reacting instinctively to something to much more of a reflective, responsive way of responding to a situation or somebody, then that transforms how you actually act and what you say. So it's about giving yourself a little bit of space.
Yeah.
So you go, right, I'm not going to charge in. I'm not going to, I'm not going to let my instinctive responses dominate how I act in this situation.
That's
I'm
an interesting one, yeah.
going to give myself a little bit of space and time to think.
I can relate to that one because recently I got diagnosed with ADHD, so it was last year, and after that I got put on Elvan's stimulant medication, which helped a lot. But then I've had to come off it for now, just for reasons of losing a bit of weight for it, because one of the symptoms you can have is appetite suppression. But then as I did have the tablets and stuff, I noticed that it did give me moments to pause and moments to sort of question, like, or like not go into my impulsives and not sort of act in that way that you're talking about. So it made me think about that actually, just when you were mentioning that then. And now that I'm off the tablets for the time being, it's something that's more of a challenge again to be able to take those pauses.
And I think for all of us, you know, if we can give ourselves a little bit more time to think about how we want to respond, particularly if we're in situations that are stressful, you know, work situations, you know, something's gone wrong, problem needs fixing, you know, customers, you know, shouting that they want stuff yesterday, all of those things that we come across at work. If we can find a way to give ourselves a little bit of time and a little bit of space to think and consider, then our kind of responses will be so much better. And we talked earlier about, you know, little shifts, and one of the best ways to give yourself that thinking time is to think about questions that you can ask. So if you're in a situation, you're in a meeting or, you know, something like that, something's gone wrong, something needs to be fixed, give yourself thinking time by asking questions. Because too often, particularly when somebody is the most senior person in the room, you know, team lead or senior developer or, you know, whoever it is, the pressure is there to have the answer. You know, to come up with this, I've got the answer, I've got the solution, listen to me, I'll share this and we'll be all right. But I think if we can stop, move away from that and think about questions, that gives us a lot more space and time to think.
I think the questions are good because it's like that's the way coaching works, isn't it? It's about probing questions that challenge the person to bring themselves, like the power out of themselves, and like find their own power and stuff. And
it does, and it's a super easy way to include lots of other people as well. Yeah.
Because if sometimes a coach will give their own skills and expertise and give advice, but then a lot of the time you need to just ask questions and hold space, don't you?
You do, absolutely. And, you know, that might take quite a bit of time. That might take a lot of willpower to suppress that urge to go, oh God, I know what we should be doing here. And we should be solving this like this. I've done this before. But the danger of that kind of thinking is that you exclude others. It leads you down a kind of command and control style of leadership. It can lead to micromanagement, where you're telling everybody what to do all the time. And it can lead, if that pattern is repeated, and our brains love patterns and love habits, so we tend to, if we've used a strategy once and our brain has kind of classified that as, oh, that worked, we'll use it again and again and again, and it becomes more and more instinctive, and you do it more and more without thinking. And if you do that in that kind of, you're the one that always solves the problem, you tend to end up with a team that is quite passive, that seeks permission for everything. We once worked with a head of digital marketing at an agency, and he talked about becoming the Google search engine for the team. So every little thing would always come back to him, and the team would always go, oh, what do you think about this? How should we do this? How should I do this? And that's, you know, if you're a team, that's not what you want. You want an autonomous team that go out and are active, that, you know, go and solve problems, obviously include you, but you're not the dependency. They are not seeking your help at all times. And if you're always solving problems rather than asking questions and include and bringing people in, you know, that's a position you can quite quickly get into.
Yeah, I think it's about the letting go of perfectionism as well sometimes, isn't it? And just allowing yourself to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes. And I guess I've maybe have a structure in place that helps you to look at the mistakes and then find solutions, or look at mistakes and see what you can change.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think in in expert environments, so, technical teams, experts, that space for mistakes is really hard. Really hard, because particularly for senior people, because again, you have gained your status in an organisation, your job title, your salary, the respect of your colleagues and peers, because of your ability to do things, to solve problems, to be able to, deliver. And creating space for mistakes, allowing other people to do things in a different way that you would do them, and to let them make mistakes, that's really hard.
Yeah, it's hard
really
if you know
hard.
the solution, isn't it? You see the solution, everyone's doing all the wrong things, and you're like, oh.
It is. This brings me back to my point about why I'm so keen to help experts and technical people be better leaders, is because I think generally at work we underestimate that challenge. So the leadership challenge, if you're an expert, is that you're given responsibility to deliver something, build a new platform, deliver something, whatever it might be. You're shouldering that responsibility, and you might know how to do it. You might have the technical experience and expertise to be able to do that. However, the scale of what you've been asked to do is too big for you to do. Doesn't matter how many late nights you pull, no matter how many Sundays you might end up working, you'll still never be able to do the work because it's so much bigger than what you could do. That's why you're in that role of leader. So your job is to get this thing delivered through other people, not your own expertise. And that's a real difficult. So you know what to do, you know how to do it, but you're not judged on you doing it, because that's impossible. You're judged on how you lead other people to do it.
Yeah, that's based around communication and things like that, isn't it?
Exactly.
And how do you get across I guess you just start communicating what the problem is, and then leaving it to them, and then seeing out, because a lot of the time you'll give them the problem, and then they'll fix it in a way you didn't even think of, and you're like,
You
be
could
like,
do.
I didn't think of that one.
It's that balance between guidance, advice, mentorship, coaching, and micromanaging and doing the doing. And sometimes it feels, particularly for experts, it feels so much easier just like, oh, forget it, I'll just do it myself. Rather than, and in the short term, let's be honest, it often is quicker and easier just to do it yourself. But that causes a problem. One, you get that team dependency. You make the whole team dependent on you. You stifle any creativity, you stifle any freedom and autonomy that the team has. And the further and further you go up in your career and in your leadership journey, the less and less able you are to just go, oh, I'll just do it, because the job's so much bigger. If you're running a team of 6 or 7 people and you've got a project, you might be able to pull some late nights and get the work done yourself. If you are at a departmental head level where you're now managing managers, and you might have a team of 200 people and various projects that need to be, there's no way you can pull some late nights and do it. It's just completely out of the question.
It's impossible, isn't it?
It is. It's completely impossible. So you've got to make that shift.